Tonight on 24, the White House emphasizes the constructive nature of negotiations with Tehran, coinciding with the visit of Pakistani officials to Iran. Washington says it hasn't requested a ceasefire extension and is looking to freeze the Islamic Republic's assets in the region. Tehran threatens to halt ship traffic in the Persian Gulf and Red Sea if the naval blockade continues. Meanwhile, the Washington Post reports the deployment of 10,000 new U.S. troops to the Middle East.
Future will not be decided in Brussels. Change must and will come from within Iranian society.
A group of figures opposing the Islamic Republic attended the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee meeting on Iran. Hannah Newman says global attention is focused on U.S.-Iran negotiations, but the people of Iran are once again at risk of being overlooked.
Broadcasting live from the Iran International Studio, this is 24, hosted by Fardad Farahzad.
Good evening to Iran International viewers in Iran and worldwide. Moments ago, the White House spokesperson stated Washington has not requested a ceasefire extension with Iran. However, Carolyn Leavitt noted that negotiations with Iran remain constructive, with a second round likely in Islamabad. Meanwhile, at the same press conference, the U.S. Treasury Secretary announced the country is actively seeking to freeze the Islamic Republic's assets in the region.
Yesterday, we announced Operation Economic
Fury, building on over a year of maximum pressure against Iran. This includes blocking government payments and targeting Revolutionary Guard Corps accounts. Iran's fatal mistake of attacking Gulf Cooperation Council states has driven these countries to act more transparently. We have now asked them to conduct a deeper review of the financial resources held in their banking systems and to freeze more assets belonging to Revolutionary Guard Corps leaders and members. We've also told countries and companies that if they buy Iranian oil or if Iranian money enters their banks, we are ready to impose secondary sanctions, a very strict measure. Iranians should know that this issue is the financial equivalent of the action we are taking in the military sphere.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon has announced it will soon dispatch over 10,000 more military personnel to the Middle East. The report states that about 6,000 military personnel, along with the aircraft carrier USS George W. Bush and several other ships, will go to the region. Meanwhile, Donald Trump told Fox News an hour ago that even though he sees the end of this war as very near, in his opinion, America's work is not yet finished. Simultaneously in Europe, according to reports, European countries are drafting a plan to form a broad coalition to secure Iranian shipping in the Strait of Hormuz and for mine clearance. This plan, if finally agreed upon, is supposed to be implemented after the war ends. Our correspondents Ahmed Samadi from Berlin and Samira Garayi from the White House are with us. Samira, first tell us what picture is emerging from the White House. We're hearing different signals. From Mr. Trump's first interview with Fox News, where the impression was that he was saying the war was over, to now there's talk of deploying more troops and that perhaps more pressure will come upon Tehran.
Fardad, the recent news we are hearing is quite contradictory and can easily be misunderstood. Specifically, I am looking at this Washington Post report that states more troops are entering the region. Of course, we need to be clear that this absolutely doesn't mean that a completely new set of U.S. Army forces will, for example, hastily board transport planes and enter the region. That's simply not the case here. Instead, we already know the USS George H.W. Bush was headed to the region, and on that specific aircraft carrier alone, there are roughly 6,000 U.S. Marines. Furthermore, another 4,200 troops associated with the rest of the U.S. naval strike groups are entering the region as well. Yesterday, based on recent satellite images, the USS Bush was seen sailing around South Africa, taking an unknown and highly unusual route to enter the Middle East. It is from this strategic perspective that we are discussing more troops entering the region. The broader discussion, as defense analysts emphasized in a recent report to the Washington Post, is that Mr. Trump's tactical options, if he does not extend the current ceasefire, would be more varied and numerous. Consequently, his hands would be freer militarily. Well, these are the major news stories being published in American media, either quoting highly informed sources or closely observing the U.S. military situation in the region and its immediate surroundings. Officially, what we're hearing from the White House is focused. Just minutes ago, Ms. Leavitt's press conference ended, and Mr. Besant, the Treasury Secretary, was also there. There, we're mostly hearing about ongoing negotiations. The rising gasoline issue here is an incredibly important one. Several reporters asked pointed questions. Since the Treasury Secretary was also present, they specifically asked him about gasoline. So that clearly means we won't have cheap gasoline this summer, and we won't go back to those previous prices. Mr. Besant referred to the ongoing negotiations and to the fundamental idea that one should hope something can be resolved through diplomacy, ensuring they can settle the complex matter. And then, looking at the calendar from early July to early September, that was the specific time frame Mr. Besant set for domestic gasoline prices here at home to steadily go down during that period. Ms. Leavitt herself, in her recent discussions and talks, again referred to the negotiation topic, stating they had constructive conversations. Let's go hear some parts.
Saw some reporting, again, bad reporting this morning.
I have also seen some reports, again incorrect reports this morning, that said we had officially requested a ceasefire extension. That is not correct at the moment. We are still seriously engaged in these negotiations and discussions. As you heard from the Vice President and also the President this week, these discussions are constructive and ongoing, and that's the current situation. I've also seen some reports about the possibility of in-person negotiations. These discussions are being explored, but nothing is official unless it's announced from here, from the White House. However, we feel good about the possibility of reaching an agreement. The President also mentioned this in his interview yesterday. It's clear that, from our perspective, it's in Iran's best interest to agree to the President's demands.
The U.S. has not received a ceasefire request from any party. No official date has been set for the start of the second round of negotiations either. If something happens, it will be in Islamabad. These are important points that Ms. Leavitt referred to. We heard in reports that yesterday the negotiations made some progress. Vance, Bitkoff, and Kushner are exchanging written texts with the Iranian parties and the Pakistani mediator. They're going back and forth on proposals, and some progress has indeed been made. Axios says that some progress has been made and the negotiations have been positive, but no date has been set. The United States isn't saying that they are still going to enter another round. What's clear is that Mr. Trump says the conflict and hostilities are on the verge of ending, not that they have ended, and the United States still has unfinished business. We know this. On the other hand, if we look at Mr. Vance, his deputy, they insist that all enrichment must be permanently abandoned. We know this is one of the important issues, to the point that they even had problems creating a framework for understanding regarding enrichment. And it seems like until this framework is established, until they reach an agreement on these general issues, the rest, like what economic incentives will be given, or what the Islamic Republic will or won't do, those really come in later stages.
Ahmed, this coalition that the Europeans are talking about, which is supposed to help with free navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, establish regional security, it's interesting, but the strange thing is they say after the war ends. Right now it seems there's a crisis. What's it going to do after the war?
Actually, this is a complex topic that both the mainstream media and industry experts are actively addressing right now, and they're repeatedly raising these same questions. I will give you the ultimate conclusion right at the beginning. Many leading experts strongly emphasize that this ambitious mission will remain entirely symbolic. Furthermore, it probably won't even be implemented, given the massive logistical problems and significant challenges that exist. So this anticipated plan is now set to be presented the day after tomorrow, on Friday, in Paris, by Mr. Macron and Mr. Starmer, who, as we well know, are currently under severe attacks from Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump has recently called Mr. Starmer a coward and a scaredy cat, and despite this rhetoric, they are moving forward on proposing this plan. Furthermore, it was also announced just minutes ago today that Mr. Merz will join the other key European leaders in Paris. The rest of the representatives will apparently join the discussion via video conference. In this important meeting that's being held, they will carefully review the specifics of this plan, part of whose draft has also already come out to the public. The main thing is that the specialized units are supposed to help stranded commercial ships that are stuck in the ports of countries bordering the Persian Gulf. They're going to safely bring them out, help with critical mine clearance operations, and then later on actively escort other vulnerable ships during the subsequent operational stages. But here's the crucial thing. They don't want to get involved right now while the conflict is active. Rather, they want to get involved when there's a formal ceasefire, and the war there is completely over, so they can actually do these things safely. Which, well, that itself naturally raises more complicated questions. Are they going to coordinate their efforts with the Islamic Republic too? Well, naturally, many political experts and media outlets say that the Islamic Republic, well, naturally can't help them. After all, there are conflicting interests there, and the Europeans themselves have stated that no, the Islamic Republic is not going to be part of this plan. And no, neither the US nor Israel are going to come. Once again, the diplomatic disagreements here are rapidly increasing, meaning some of these very countries that are supposed to hold the critical meeting the day after tomorrow have profound disagreements regarding the potential presence of other nations, specifically a third party. So Mr. Macron, naturally, says that the United States will simply not be present in this coalition. Meanwhile, Mr. Starmer expresses deep concern that if Donald Trump isn't there, he might get angry and completely mess up the whole thing. And we see clearly that right here, they're disagreeing with each other yet again. The Germans too. Even though they want to get involved now and their chancellor has said, we're going to Paris, there's also a point regarding Germany's involvement. The Germans are considered a huge asset for the Europeans. Why? Because of the advanced ships and equipment they have, especially for mine clearance. And well, for the Europeans, Germany can be a big prize. The Europeans have 150 minesweepers. And well, it's said that the Americans are behind the Europeans in this area. The number of minesweepers they have is fewer. And, well, the Germans can't just easily join this coalition, because this coalition needs to have a mission from a credible source, which the Germans have in their constitution, meaning either this mission must be set up by the European Union and requested from Germany, or by the United Nations. And so the Germans can't just, for example, Mr. Macron and Mr. Starmer and a few countries decide they want to form a coalition, and then they just go and participate in it. The previous coalition that the Germans participated in, which is called Operation Astrides, which was in the Red Sea because of the Houthis, was with the approval of the European Union. That's how the Germans went and participated. And so what's being talked about now? Firstly, they're probably, most likely, saying it will be symbolic. The fact that it might be implemented, well, after the war, is also still questionable. And, well, these bury disagreements about it.
Thank you, Ahmed Samadi from Berlin and Samir Durai from the White House. The strict naval blockade of Iranian ports in the Sea of Oman and the broader Persian Gulf continues today. You are currently seeing live images of the active monitoring of ships whose satellite tracking systems are turned on. As you can clearly see, in the very heart of the strategic Strait of Hormuz, that is the area just above Khassab in Oman, up to its maritime border near Larak port in Iran, absolutely no ships are passing through. However, if you look closely at Iran's southern coast, there are indeed several ships anchored there. Some of these vessels apparently tried to navigate from the southern side of the Persian Gulf towards the Sea of Oman. Some of these commercial cargo vessels unexpectedly encountered the US Navy on patrol, and just an hour ago, CENTCOM officially broadcast one of these tense radio communications to the public. But as you can clearly see on the tracking maps, a large portion of this vital maritime traffic is completely paralyzed. Ships are either idling in the eastern part, floating in the Sea of Oman, or hopelessly stuck in the western half, deep within the Persian Gulf, and they currently have absolutely no safe way in or out. This situation exists because both the Iranian side and the American military forces have aggressively imposed a mutual blockade. The Iranians are firmly refusing to let international cargo ships exit or enter the region's ports, and the Americans are naturally doing the exact same thing with all of the Iranian ships. The tracking signs that are red indicate large oil tankers, and the ships that are marked in green are standard commercial cargo ships. The official news agency of the United Arab Emirates has reported that the Vice President of the UAE and Mohammed Bakr Ghalibaf had a phone call an hour ago and discussed ways to de-escalate tensions. The spokesperson for Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has emphasized the Islamic Republic's right to continue its nuclear program based on its membership in the NPT.
The exchange of messages is continuing ever since that Sunday when the delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran returned to Tehran. Right up until today, numerous important diplomatic messages have been continuously exchanged through the designated Pakistani mediator. Our diplomatic positions were made very clear both there and during these ongoing exchanges. In the near future, it is highly likely that we will be hosting a delegation from Pakistan, directly following up on the foundational talks that recently took place in Islamabad.
Shaheen Sami, a national security expert from Virginia, and Shahir Shahid Saleh, an international relations and Iran affairs analyst from Calgary, Canada, are with us. Thank you to both of you, gentlemen. Mr. Shahid Saleh, I'll start with you. One sticking point, which perhaps seems to be discussed less, is these Persian Gulf countries, especially the Qataris, the Emiratis, who are very upset with the Islamic Republic's approach in these negotiations we're seeing. It seems that the Pakistani parties are now making calls to the capitals of the Persian Gulf countries. But how possible do you genuinely think it even is to fully satisfy these neighboring countries, especially the Emiratis, to continue their diplomatic relations with the Islamic Republic?
Yes, navigating the complexities of the current situation certainly seems very difficult to me. But do keep in mind anyway that these diverse countries are all anchored in that region, including both the southern Persian Gulf nations and the Islamic Republic. If this confrontational trend continues, this current trajectory simply isn't sustainable. Ultimately, because they are permanent neighbors, they absolutely have to find a way to live together. And their long-term interests are also deeply rooted in living together peacefully. One of the highest trade volumes in the world for Iranians is conducted with the UAE. You simply cannot just suddenly abandon a mutually beneficial economic partnership like that. It's also important for the UAE, and hostility with the Islamic Republic, getting into conflict, even trade conflicts, is not in the interest of the UAE and the Persian Gulf countries. In my opinion, overall, with all these things, let's remember that wars actually start based on miscalculation, but then their continuation is based on profit and loss, meaning it becomes calculations of profit and loss. Consequently, in my opinion, in the end, even though it seems very unlikely right now, these countries are rooted in this region. They have to live together, and they have no other realistic choice. So they have to somehow come to terms with each other. In my opinion, the diplomatic activities Pakistan is undertaking have a real chance of succeeding, especially if it coincides with shifting alliances. Because the key issue is the issue of peace between the end of the war, the actual end of the overarching war between Iran and America. This key issue, if that gets resolved and the Strait of Hormuz reopens, in my opinion, they should and will return to normal conditions. It will definitely take time, in my opinion. It's not something that's an on-off switch where everything suddenly goes back to normal.
Mr. Sami, are there signs that perhaps the Islamic Republic might offer more concessions regarding its nuclear program? Many observers, some countries in the region, including these very Emiratis, are saying that the actions the Islamic Republic is taking are terrorist. We don't negotiate with terrorists. Senior officials of this country were saying such things. The US government and Israel, too, on the verge of war, during the war, were saying things that signaled they were seeking regime change in Iran, seeking to overthrow the Islamic Republic. If the Islamic Republic, even if it completely abandons its nuclear program, but remains in a meaningful way for a long time, can't it say it has won this war?
Respectful greetings to Mr. Farhazad, Mr. Shahid Saleh, and Iran's brave people. I don't believe that. No, because look, even if we assume that the Islamic Republic reached a favorable agreement in these ongoing negotiations, a heavily isolated country that is currently under a naval blockade, a country that practically cannot defend itself, and a nation that has not been able to act pragmatically in any way, neither in the turbulent past 40 days, nor in the past 47 years, cannot survive. It has only tried to desperately stay in power with empty promises and hollow pledges. It simply cannot save itself from the devastating systemic problem it is creating through its deeply corrupt rent-seeking economy. In fact, we will inevitably witness a kind of complete structural collapse from within. Why? Because a government that cannot maintain its economic system also cannot provide the rations and wages to those repressive forces and those who keep it in power, so it will be very difficult for it. But the Islamic Republic could also, at least if they had any wisdom, they could come and say, we are ready, and to show good faith, we will actually hold a referendum so they can shut up the Europeans and Americans too. But the Islamic Republic, for sure, won't do something like that because it has a strong desire to stay in power. And the Islamic Republic has also learned over these past few years that the more it wants to drag out an issue, the more it can pull Western governments along with it. Or if it's going to go for that hero-making that Mr. Trump himself is very fond of.
Mr. Shahid Sales, is it possible that if these efforts haven't led to the complete uprooting of the Islamic Republic, Americans and Israelis might now change their position and say, all right, let's temporarily separate a big branch, which is the nuclear program, from the body of this tree, and we'll get to the next negotiations over a longer period?
When you say separate an evil, do you essentially mean to put it aside, deliberately ignore the issue, and leave it completely unresolved? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean they should take it away. So if they can solve the nuclear issue now, and there are signs that maybe the Iranian side will make concessions, remove the enriched uranium from Iran, and put enrichment aside, well, that would remove a big headache for Americans, Israel, and even the Persian Gulf countries. Other issues like the missile program, proxy groups, even human rights issues, they might say, all right, we'll address those in the longer term.
I understand. No, you're exactly right. The main conflict right now is over these 2 points. You mentioned one is the issue of enrichment, and the other is removing uranium with 60% enrichment. These are the 2 issues. The rest are secondary. You're absolutely right. If they reach an agreement on these 2, in my opinion, other issues are secondary and will be set aside. America, in particular, doesn't have any specific sensitivity regarding this matter. Although, in my opinion, Israel will still complain loudly. Israel won't truly accept it, at least on paper, and theoretically speaking, it will reject this ceasefire. Just as Mr. Netanyahu has stated, we will start the war whenever we want. He realistically has no choice, because he absolutely cannot say that we will abide by this ceasefire forever. As a result, in my opinion, what you're saying is absolutely correct. If these 2 issues are resolved, other issues are secondary and will be set aside.
Mr. Sami, how much do you think, given these additional forces America is sending to the region and the experience we've had in the past few negotiations, that contrary to this current media image that perhaps the parties are reaching an agreement, it might actually be a fire under the ashes, and in the coming days and weeks, the situation might again escalate towards war?
I certainly wouldn't rule it out entirely, because look at the current geopolitical dynamics. Mr. Trump, on one hand, is publicly talking about pursuing that diplomatic process. However, this is essentially operating on 2 parallel lines. The ideological viewpoints of the Islamic Republic and the strict strategic demands of the United States are diametrically opposed and will likely never meet. On the other hand, the head of Mossad bluntly announced yesterday that our work will be finished when this regime has changed and collapsed. And on the other hand, we also clearly see that these strategic military deployments are in fact the state's tangible progress towards getting exactly what the Islamic Republic isn't willing to give up at the diplomatic negotiating table. And what precisely is that objective? It is the highly enriched uranium that is heavily fortified and buried deep within the ground in shielded bunkers. And the Americans realize they essentially have to go in and get it out themselves. So because of this frustrating diplomatic stalemate, I firmly believe that this continuous military buildup, which is demonstrably getting stronger, larger, and more heavily equipped every single day, and let's not forget that just a few short weeks ago, there was also widespread talk that the elite 82nd Airborne Division of the United States also deployed directly to that volatile region. This situation is leading us to believe that all of this ongoing unrest is a simmering fire under the ashes that could very well be the beginning of an inevitable end for the Islamic Republic's oppressive rule. And let's also keep in mind that for the United States, on the surface and in public statements, the main issue might just appear to be opposition to the regime's nuclear and ballistic missile issues. However, the immense pressure exerted behind the scenes because they brutally massacred the Iranian people will require that the US must have a definitive response for that tragic reality too. This moral obligation will not let the United States off the hook, especially as we are rapidly approaching the highly consequential US elections.
Thank you to both of you. Shayan Sami, national security expert from Virginia, and Shahir Shahid Salas, international relations and Iran issues analyst from Calgary, Canada. Minutes ago, the voting session on the War Powers Resolution, intended to limit President Trump's military attacks on the Islamic Republic, officially began in the U.S. Senate. A number of Republicans, defending the White House's recent strategic plan regarding the Islamic Republic, welcomed the removal of Iran's immediate nuclear threat. But at the same time, they remain deeply concerned that if Tehran regains access to its frozen financial resources, the country's military and nuclear capabilities could quickly be rebuilt. Our correspondent, Marzieh Hosseini, is with us from the U.S. Congress with more details. Marzieh?
Okay, Fardad, the critical voting process is underway right now as I am speaking to you. I am closely checking the floor tally. So far, there are 47 votes officially in favor and 52 solidly against the measure. One single vote is still predictably missing. I don't know exactly which senator hasn't cast their vote yet, but it strongly seems that his final decision will simply fall in line with a strict pattern of the previous 3 times. It is important to note that this is already the 4th time the U.S. Senate is putting a formal resolution to a floor vote to stop this devastating war immediately, without further delay. The title of this comprehensive resolution focuses entirely on the immediate withdrawal of U.S. troops from any war involving Iran. So far, Republican Senator Rand Paul and Democratic Senator John Fetterman have both voted against it. One of the lawmakers who opposed this resolution is someone I just spoke with. Let's go ahead and listen to a soundbite, and then we will come right back.
Look, I'm not directly involved in budget matters, but the president's goal was to ensure that the Iranian government, which is both ruthless with its own people and threatens the world, cannot build or fire a nuclear weapon, and that their overall military capability is weakened. In my opinion, the president has been successful in this, but now the Iranian government has taken control of the Strait of Hormuz. If they are allowed to keep it, they can generate revenue and rearm themselves. We shouldn't let that happen. Sometimes a job fails because you make your first offer and then you leave the table, but you come back again. That's why I won't consider it a failure until I see the final result. Also, it seems there's a rumor that they're going to have a meeting again soon.
Rumor that they're going to meet again shortly.
Well, Fardad, that was Senator Cassidy from the Republican Party. We heard his opinion too. But one very interesting point that I'm seeing here in Congress today is the disagreements among Republican Party members regarding attacks on Iran, which have increased today. On Tuesday, as is customary for Tuesdays, a lunch is held here in the U.S. Congress, where senators have the opportunity, away from the media, to bring out their real differences of opinion. They call it taking the temperature, meaning measuring the mood. It was very important yesterday's lunch. The senators had also said, after this lunch, we'll understand what situation we're in, who supports Trump and who doesn't. Now it's come to light that after this lunch, it seems, if I want to simplify it, Republican senators are divided into 3 categories. The first group are people who are acting very conservatively. They say, we don't have a problem with continuing the war, and we support Trump, but our issue is that Congress is ineffective. Congress has no influence. They say, let's do something. This resolution that the Democrats are passing, that's one thing. Let's pass our own resolution, a bill that allows Trump, they are the majority after all. If they want to, they can do this very quickly. Let's tell Trump that he has a free hand in these attacks, so he can continue it for as long as he wants. Why did they say that? First, what this issue does is it gives the upper hand to the U.S. in negotiations with the Islamic Republic and shows that the U.S. Congress supports Trump's decisions. And second, it gives Republican lawmakers themselves the authority to also exert influence. These aren't just suggesting, they're compelling. They say until Trump explains what he wants to do that doesn't help us pass this resolution to support these attacks, we absolutely will not fund the continuation of this war. The second group of senators who are, in a way, opposing are those senators who apparently went home to their states during these Easter holidays and have now returned. And they heard from their constituents that people are deeply upset about the rising cost of gasoline. A couple of them came right here and told us reporters. They said people in our home state are complaining about the sharp increase in gas prices at a pump. And now, well, this issue is something that it can seriously affect their constituencies. They'll be asking those exact same people for votes in just a few months, you know? And because of those votes they desperately want, they're saying we are against this war. And now Trump really needs to clarify things for us. Remember, these are Republicans speaking out. I'm not talking about Democrats. And the last stage, which actually includes Mr. Lindsey Graham and Mr. John Thune among the Republicans, they're saying, for now, things have gone well. They're saying, for the time that has passed since this war began, things are under control. Let's not pass any bill nor prevent these attacks. Let's see where things go. And maybe everything will end well before the 3-month period. The 3 months refers to a period where 2 months are authorized for Trump to continue the war under a law passed in 1973. And they also consider an additional 1-month exception at the end. They're saying, well, until the end of, or rather the beginning of May, which is roughly the next 15 days. Those 60 days are considered. I'm saying these are approximate. And so until the end of May, they have time for Trump to do whatever he wants. And after that, in fact, disagreements will probably increase within the Republican Party and more people will join the Democrats. And this resolution, which currently seems not to have passed, let me just check again. No, it's still 52-47. If this situation continues, probably more people will join those 47 and pass this resolution.
Thank you, Marzia Husseini, my colleague from the U.S. Congress. CNN says the Islamic Republic is actively rebuilding its fortified missile cities. Citing new high-resolution satellite images, the network reported that Tehran is rebuilding underground military bases and reopening strategic entrance tunnels around at least one major missile city that was damaged in U.S. and Israeli attacks. According to defense experts, these rapid movements are a critical part of Iran's strategy to quickly restore its ballistic missile capabilities and prepare for a new round of potential operations. Our correspondent, Mariam Rahmati, joins us live from the United Nations headquarters in New York. Mariam, perhaps it wasn't all that surprising. There were reports in the past, too, that some of the facilities that the Americans and Israelis destroyed weren't completely obliterated. There are still intact remnants of some of these missiles underground, and the Islamic Republic is naturally looking to revive them.
No, Fardad, the report isn't actually that strange when you consider the broader context. What we were hearing repeatedly in recent weeks from both U.S. and Israeli officials were confident assertions that Allied operations had either completely destroyed or severely weakened the Islamic Republic's military capabilities. We even heard this optimistic assessment several times directly from the President of the United States. But these newly analyzed satellite images released by CNN paint a very different picture. They clearly show that the Islamic Republic's core missile program, contrary to those bold public claims, hasn't been permanently destroyed, as they said. Instead, the infrastructure is still highly recoverable. Furthermore, according to the latest U.S. intelligence assessments, about half of the some of these highly guarded launchers, hidden deep underground and inside the sprawling, fortified missile cities of the Islamic Republic, were actually damaged significantly during the coordinated Israeli and U.S. military attacks. The specific tunnel entrances, Fardad, were precisely targeted by airstrikes and essentially got buried under massive amounts of collapsed rock and rubble. Now, what the Islamic Republic has proactively done is take full advantage of the temporary ceasefire to clear out and reopen these very tunnels and blot subterranean pathways. Furthermore, recent satellite images analyzed by CNN clearly show that the Islamic Republic is actively using extensive, heavy earth-moving machinery in The more important point is that this strategy is exactly part of the Islamic Republic's military doctrine. The Islamic Republic actually designed these heavily fortified underground bases for this very purpose from the beginning. They deliberately designed them deep within the terrain so they could successfully withstand a massive first attack and still remain entirely safe. Following a strike, these subterranean facilities are built to quickly get back to full operations. That is exactly why experts say this incident was highly predictable, even during a formal ceasefire. Historically, during any ceasefire, both opposing sides, as soon as active fighting stops, immediately start rebuilding their operational capabilities, restocking their arsenals, and preparing for future engagements.
Thank you, Mariam Rahmati from the United Nations headquarters in New York. An hour ago, the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee held a meeting on Iran, attended by a number of political and civil figures opposing the Islamic Republic. In this meeting, political and social developments, Iran's situation, and the European Union's approach were discussed. Shireen Ebadi, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Saeed Bashirtash, head of Central Council of the 7th Aban Front, Abdullah Mohtadi, Secretary General of the Kamala Party of Iranian Kurdistan, and a number of other speakers were present. Hannah Newman, a member of the German parliament, said at this meeting that change will come from within Iran, but that doesn't mean the world should stay silent.
An empty chair. It stands for those who
There is an empty chair here. This chair is for those who can't be here because they are imprisoned in Iran, have been silenced, and their access to the world has been cut off due to government violence. This chair reminds all of us that many more people should be part of this conversation, but they can't. So no single group, no single voice, and no single meeting can represent all of Iran on its own. Let me be clear, Iran's future will not be decided in Brussels. Change must be able to emerge from within Iranian society. We shouldn't just be spectators. We have a responsibility to listen, amplify voices, and act transparently. By putting human rights first, we must speak out against executions, demand the release of political prisoners, oppose repression and internet shutdowns, and limit the Islamic Republic's resources.
That was Hannah Newman, Germany's representative in the European Parliament. I had mistakenly said German Parliament. Daria Safai, a Belgian Parliament member of Iranian descent, has also joined us from Brussels. Ms. Safai, thank you for accepting our invitation. Europeans have been more or less quiet, or even in some cases opposed to this recent conflict with the Islamic Republic. How much do you think meetings and efforts like these can help in a situation where the survival of the Islamic Republic in the shadow of these negotiations perhaps seems stronger than before?
Well, obviously, these meetings are very important. The reason they're held is so that there are people who can hear the real voice of the people inside that country, especially those who have no contact with the outside world due to internet shutdowns. And, well, Europe really hasn't had a strong, unified voice in these tragic recent events regarding the brutal massacre that happened in Iran, or in the devastating and unjust internal war that took place. In fact, the European community hasn't even believed it could play a meaningful diplomatic role in shaping the region's political future. It has largely chosen to step back when true leadership was needed. And if a voice has come from it occasionally, it's in a hesitant, overly cautious voice that in a profound way failed to provide the genuine support that the brave citizens so rightfully deserved for the historic Lion and Sun Revolution and the broader Iranian People's Revolution. Naturally, holding this significant meeting within the esteemed European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee is a very important issue. It clearly shows that this critical matter is still being paid close attention to by international policymakers. Furthermore, this platform can, in a deeply impactful way, actually inform a broader audience, just like the dedicated participants in this panel earnestly try to do. The primary objective is to accurately bring the authentic voice of the affected people directly to Europe, and I hope that they can actually take this voice back to their own countries so that they can get out of this indecision and know that the future of the Middle East, the future of the region, and the security of the region are only possible with a departure of the Islamic Republic regime.
We're also seeing in the images that political figures with very different views were present at this meeting, from Mr. Bashirtash to Mr. Mohtadi. How important do you think such meetings are, not just in European parliaments, but also among the Iranian opposition itself?
Well, honestly, I myself was actually critical that the combination they had put together wasn't necessarily the voice of the Iranian nation. In some of the participants, it was evident that they, in a way, even wanted to create distance or division among the Iranian people, which, in my opinion, in Iran, but wants to get rid of the regime. And, well, the fact that there was necessarily so much talk about the Kurdish nation there, I genuinely do not think it is appropriate for such a sensitive meeting. Highly critical people who actively wanted to find fault were already questioning exactly what issue these individuals were discussing, even though they completely lacked true legitimacy to represent the broader Iranian nation. Well, but anyway, it was incredibly important that everyone unanimously wanted to transition away from this oppressive regime, because even if we currently see widespread discrimination in the situation of the Islamic Republic for anyone who belongs to Iran, that is not to say the future system will be like this at all. The future democratic system firmly believes in equal citizenship rights for all Iranian citizens. It included citizens of gender and of every distinct ethnicity. And, well, obviously, the specific arrangement the European Union had made was exactly like this. But I am truly happy because in that panel, the authentic voice of the Iranian people was clearly heard. It was the real voice of 80% of our resilient nation who courageously shouted the name of Prince Pahlavi in the streets of Iran. They even gave their blood to free Iran, and before giving their blood, they fully entrusted this great responsibility of leading the crucial transitional period to the prince. We also heard this clear voice echoed in the panel, including from my husband, Saeed Bashirtash, who serves as the secretary of the 7th Aban Front. He specifically told all attending European Parliament members that European countries should formally recognize the leadership of Prince Reza Pahlavi. Furthermore, he urged them to recognize the undeniable national will of the Iranian nation and allow Iran to finally reach a democratic state where the Iranian people themselves will freely choose what they want for the future of their beloved country. And it's not European countries that are trying to tell us now that we don't want a monarchy, we want this, I don't know, we want a republic, we want that. The people of the world and Europe will not have a role in Iran's future. And the only thing they should do now is support the national revolution of the Iranian nation, support the leader of the national revolution, Prince Reza Pahlavi, and recognize him and invite him to the European Parliament. These were the things Saeed Bashirtash asked of the Parliament, of the parliamentary representatives.
Ms. Safai, how many cards do the Europeans actually have to play before the war, during the war, and now during the negotiations to open the Strait of Hormuz? We hear a lot of talk, both from European capitals and from Brussels, but in practice, the Europeans don't seem to have a significant role, do they?
I can say, in a way, Europe actually, in the past several years, has greatly weakened their collective defense organization's situation by investing far too little in it. Of course, this is not to imply that they don't have a good defense, but perhaps in the current volatile situation, they will still stubbornly choose the easy way out, as they call it. It is a dangerous path that actually has no viable future. For 47 years, they've seen that continuous appeasement with the Islamic Republic has had no real benefit. Besides significantly strengthening the regime, it merely emboldens them into taking hostages and carrying out deadly terrorist operations directly within European countries. But still, as you can see, international leaders often feel that the global price of oil and gas is far too important to risk. These economic concerns ultimately prevent them from finding the political will necessary to support real change. However, I must emphasize that right now, compared to previous months, the continuous information dissemination efforts by the Iranian diaspora remain crucial. Unfortunately, severe government-imposed internet shutdowns have caused direct communication with the people inside Iran to become exceptionally limited. But despite all this, All this information dissemination can play an important role in that finally, after all the negotiations, that this Western world, with all its appeasement, will finally understand that this Islamic Republic won't be convinced by any means and won't sit at a table with them in any way. And this is where we, the Iranian nation, must strengthen ourselves so that on the day the world is also ready, we can deliver the final blow to this bloodthirsty regime.
Thank you, Daria Safai, Iranian-Belgian Member of Parliament, and thank you for being a viewer of tonight's 24 program. In the past few minutes, the Islamic Republic's Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, has published a tweet or a post on the social media platform X, which shows a video of Marshal Munir's arrival in Iran. He expressed gratitude for what he called Pakistan's generous hosting of the talks. You know that Pakistan is the current important mediator for potential negotiations between Tehran and Washington. And with that, we've reached the end of the program. Thank you for being our viewer. You can watch the program again later on Iran International's YouTube channel.